Hi, I'm Gavin with Haverstick Designs, and this is the S.O.U.N.D project. So I'm here today with Dan Madison from HDB Media. Thanks so much for joining us.
Really Great to see you, Gavin. Good to be here.
Yeah. So wow, it's really cool to be back here because we did this project in 2013.
That's right.
It's a lot's happened since then for both of us.
Very much so.
I'm excited to catch up and kind of see what you've been up to. But for our audience, could you give a little bit of background about how you got into this industry and what you do now?
Sure. Yeah, it started when I was just a kid. I mean, I always loved recording. I used to have my parents gave me this little Fisher-Price tape recorder, back in the 80s, and I would go around the house with this little thing and record anything I possibly could. And it just kind of went from there. Through the years, I got into music and recording music, little 8-track recorder, also cassette-based. And so through the years, I went to school, actually at Asbury University down in Kentucky, and studied media, and graduated and went to work for a couple different companies doing production work, and then finally stepped out on my own. That would have been around 2008.
Okay.
To start the business.
Yeah. And what did you focus on when you first started the business?
Initially, it was all video production.
Oh, okay.
So what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And with an emphasis on sound. And so I've always loved sound, and video production gave me kind of a initial start to work with clients so I could basically have income, because just doing sound work was so specialized, it was hard to start there.
Sure.
So I worked in video production through about 2020, when I decided to make the shift and alter and change to sound production, post-audio, for film and television.
Yeah, and when you're doing video work, what was the majority of your clients? What kind of video work did you do?
I did a lot of corporate video, which is not always the most fun thing to do, but it paid the bills.
Sure.
And it helped me refine my skills better. Did some animation work with a friend of mine, and we helped do some sound design for the animation work. Also worked with some large churches throughout the years to do some production work for them as a contractor.
Yeah. Did that require you to do a lot of travel, or was it mostly local?
It did. We did a lot of travel, especially we did some work with some parachurch organizations that required us to fly a lot, and anyone that's done video work and had to travel knows that it can be a headache sometimes.
Sure.
And so that it was a learning experience, but I don't so much miss those aspects of it.
Sure. And so your passions, I think, lie more in the audio side of things, and video was a little bit of something that kept the business going. But now that you can focus just on audio, are you enjoying that?
I love it. I love post audio for film and TV is kind of my world. And so in the past few years, I've been able to connect with other people that work in video production and help them with the sound side of things, because sometimes sound gets forgotten. It's like the little brother that gets forgotten. So to be able to step in and add that emotional level, I think, which sound can bring to video, is something I love to do.
Yeah. And are you doing mostly for films and short films, feature-length films?
I love to work in film. I love to work in independent film, actually, when I can. It's not always the largest budget type thing to be involved in, so I still work in corporate video as well. And that's primarily what helps pay the bills. But when an independent film comes along, it's a joy. Yeah. Because there's such a creative element to it, creating the ambience and the sound effects and the dialogue and all the elements that go into creating that world.
Yeah. I mean, right before we started filming, you were showing me some of your work on a movie that you did, and it's just, I always knew that there's so much that goes into the audio side of things, but when you're breaking it down and showing it track by track and how none of that audio was actually recorded at the time of filming.
That's right.
And you just had to create this world, which is, I'm sure, time consuming, and but also something that's pretty fun, to be able to build something on your own.
It is. I guess I shouldn't say it's always fun. There's work to it, obviously, like anything, but primarily in film, if you can capture production sound, production audio, especially with dialogue, you're always going to have a better result if you can capture it well. Yeah. Because ADR, a dialogue replacement, is useful and it can be done, but it's very difficult to replicate the emotion and the delivery from the actors. So the better production sound, the better post audio is going to be. Yeah.
Well, and with that ADR, I'm sure it's the biggest challenge is I'm sure actors are always just thinking about the timing, you know, just like I've got to get these words to make it look like I'm actually saying them on screen. But then I think with that, it probably gets a little robotic and like there's less emotion. And so I'm sure that's a challenge. I'm sure you're kind of producing at that point too, to where you're having to get them in the right mood to do the thing. So
if the director or producers can't be involved, then you have to take those shoes. Wow. And that can be tough because you're trying to engineer and being an engineer and a producer at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And it really is about, I think, not just the timing, because timing can be adjusted. There's plugins for that to a point. But yeah, the delivery, the emotion of the moment, to bring that actor back to that place that they were in the shot, that's the hardest part.
Oh yeah.
So the times when the director can be there, even virtually, to help coach is usually a better experience.
How often do you have, are you doing most of the ADR here in the studio in your vocal booth? Okay, so actors will come here to do that.
That's true. I'd say 90% of the time. Through COVID and everything, it was a bit different. We had to rely on remote production, remote studios, and then the files were sent to me. And that's a little more difficult because you're not there to help guide the process. But, you know, that's the way the world works, and sometimes you have to work through it.
Sure. And so you also do Foley work, mostly in this room, I think you said. So what kind of things are you typically recording?
Oh, it's a lot of footsteps. You'd be amazed at how, if you watch any movie, you know, it's every footstep, every movement of a shirt or cloth has to be added, usually because it's not always captured with the production sound. Or it might be buried in the noise of the room too much. You can't hear it well. So yeah, I'll get out a series of shirts, I'll get out some shoes, we'll put them in this room. If it's a wooden floor, we can use the wooden floor here. If it's carpeting, we can bring in a carpet and do that too.
Sure.
If it's outdoor, we'll go out in the driveway and in the evening when it's quieter usually and try to capture footsteps. So I love doing that kind of stuff. It's just fun to create those elements that I think most people don't think about when they watch the movie, but that's not the point. You don't want them to think about them. You want them to be in the moment.
Yes.
So that's what helps, I think Foley helps to do, is to bring that reality to it.
And I think when you do it well, you like the clip that you just showed me, there's a guy shoveling, and I wouldn't have known that wasn't what it actually was capturing.
In fact, that opening shot in that film was shot in the forest, and it was late at night, and it was dark, so they had a generator going, a loud gas generator, so there was no way to capture anything that was usable. Wow. So that entire scene had to be rebuilt in post, which was a fun challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, the shovel digging, you know, we just went outside and found some dirt, took the field audio mixing kit out there and captured it.
That's awesome. And so it takes a long time, I'm guessing, because that was just a little clip, and I saw so many of the audio tracks that created that. How long does it take to do a typical movie, let's say like a feature-length film?
Well, some of it depends upon the demands put on you. There's timelines, but this particular film took almost a year in post audio. There was a lot of back and forth on different elements and things that need to be tweaked, things that could be done better. Yeah, that's part of it too. I think is just being open to criticism, you know, because you're going to get a lot of it at times, and not taking it personally. Sure. And helping it to help it be a better product in the end is what matters.
Yeah, I think that kind of humility is important in the types of work that we do. Like so often we're sending designs to people, and we always tell people when we do our renderings, because actually we didn't do renderings back in the day when we did this studio, but now it's a big part of our process. Yeah. And we always take a first pass at it, and we make sure people know that this is not set in stone. We want you to tear it apart if you want to, or just give us feedback. But if we went into it thinking, well, this is exactly how it should go, and not care about what the client thinks, then you get your feelings hurt and all of that, and it's not a good result. So absolutely. Yeah, you just have to be humble about it, and know what you're serving. Like you're serving the film, or you're serving the client, and making that happen for them.
And I think that's something with film, especially, that is unique. I love. It's such a community effort, you know, to produce a film, from actors to sound to producer, everything, the whole gamut. It's a massive amount of people to pull it off. So you're not just an island. Even if you're working alone, like we do in post-production, you're still part of this community, and I think that's a huge part of it too that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and how do you how do you get the work that you get? Is it mostly word of mouth and referrals, or do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, I actually decided to go back to school to get my graduate degree, which I didn't really need. I've thought about teaching, but I could teach if I decide to. But it was really the networking with people that was key. And I think when we network with people, you have to be careful that you don't make it an agenda. Like, oh, I'm going to get to know you so I can get more work.
Yes.
Even though that may come out of that relationship, I think if we approach it that way, it's pretty shallow.
Yeah.
And people see through that. So just those genuine relationships with people when I went back to school that formed, working on projects for school, we formed friendships.
Yeah.
And from that came more work, because a lot of these people have their hands in work that I have no connection with.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah, that happens in our industry too. Like there's quite a few of my best friends that they became my friends through work, but then I care more about them than I care about what they could offer our business.
That's key.
And so I think it's always important to put the relationship first, and then good things happen in good relationships.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's awesome. So you also do your own personal music, right? Like
I do. Yeah. I'm by no means or stretch a professional musician at all, but it's something I've always loved. I play guitar, and I grew up when I was in high school. I played in a little metal band, and we were pretty bad, but it was fun. And I've always loved music as a means to kind of just express emotion, take a break from work.
Yeah.
So I do it more as a hobby.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be able to have the facility that I work in to also be able to do music on occasion.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also kind of cool because of the way we designed this room, and this room being a little bit more live, a little more ambience, we can capture like an acoustic set or a singer-songwriter kind of person. So I can still dabble in that kind of production work if I want to, which on occasion does happen. It's not usually paid or
it's more
or high paid, but it's
project.
something that's kind of a passion project. So.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about this space that you built. It's off of your house.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about like the goals you had for when you dreamed this up.
Sure. When we first built this, we were going to build this as an independent building separate from the house. And at the time, our builder was the one that said, hey, why don't we just put the garage in between and connect it? So it kind of makes this horseshoe type shape. So our house is on one side, garage is the path to the studio. And it works out really well, especially in the winter when I have to go to work.
Yeah, you can go through the garage.
Go through the garage. But yeah, initially, I think the goal for this room was to film and shoot interviews, video type interviews, which is what I was doing at the time. As that part of my business shifted more to post-production, this room became more of a room for Foley, maybe some music capture. That's what drum kit is in here for, and that sort of thing. So I don't use it for video production like I used to, but it's still very functional.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, so you had contacted us about this project after it was constructed. Like it was, so we didn't do any of the design and the layout. You did an awesome job with it. Did you do that yourself? Or?
My wife was a big part of that. She really helped to lay out. She's got the eye for for design.
Space planning and everything like that.
Yeah.
So you have this nice large live room. You've got a control room in there that's a good size, because it's great now, because I'm sure when you have clients come over, they can hang out on the couch in the back.
Exactly.
Or, it's not too cramped in there.
Right.
And then you have a vocal booth as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And the biggest change for that room in the past, I'd say 5 years, has been shifting to surround mixing.
Right.
For film and television. So what was always stereo, now we're dealing with frequencies and sound bouncing in different directions. And so, but it works great the way it's been designed with the work you put into it. So that's what we're mixing in now is 5.1.
Right.
Haven't dabbled in Dolby Atmos yet. That might be down the road, but
everybody's kind of going.
5.1's enough for me.
5.1's a lot, especially switching from stereo. So
exactly.
Now I would say that when we did this project, like we came in, took some acoustical measurements. In fact, back when you were doing a lot of video work, like you filmed it.
We captured some of that.
So we have 10-year-old footage of me doing this, but it's we did testing in the main room, in the control room, and the vocal booth, and then designed our treatments around what we found. And because it's, for me as an engineer, I always want to define problems before I try to solve them, and so it's always great to do testing. Also, I used to live in Pendleton, which was really close to McCordsville here, and so it's easy to get here and do that. And the rooms already were pretty good. Like I think that, I don't know how much of that was intentional with the sizing and shaping. Did you do a lot of research as far as the room dimensions?
We did, especially in the mixing room. This room is a bit more of a rectangle, so we had to work with that and treat it. But the control room is definitely designed with the sloping ceiling and everything that you're supposed to do. It may not be perfect, but we did a better job than anything else I'd ever had in the past.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember too how we got introduced. I know that there was a couple. I think there was a couple people that had told you about my company, and then you'd reached out, but can't remember who it was.
I think actually we connected through Sweetwater.
Yeah.
The initial studio that we had was in North Carolina when I first started. It was in the basement, and I was connected to you through them as to what the basic acoustics would be in those basement rooms, which were pretty raw.
Yeah.
But that was our initial connection, and I knew about you through them.
That's right. Yeah, and that may have even been back at my previous job.
Yep.
Like when that happened, and then because I started in 2009, this business.
Okay.
But yeah, that's and it's kind of like a small world because you moved somewhere that's 10 minutes from where
Close
I lived.
to where you are.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really great to see the space and like how your business has evolved. And what I like about it is that you're doing more things that you're even more passionate about. And having the ability to do that versus doing maybe jobs that paid the bills but weren't fulfilling.
And I think that's a process. It takes time. I've done some adjunct teaching up at Taylor University, which is not too far away, in the past, and a lot of times students will ask about running a business, and how do you do what you do like right now? And it's like, well, I didn't start that way.
Right.
At first I worked for some different companies doing the work that I'm doing, made some connections, and actually when I departed my first job, it was on a good note, and my employer became my first client. So I had income initially from that. If I hadn't had the job, I wouldn't have had the initial income to start.
Right.
So that's how that worked.
Yeah, it's huge. That's the same story I have. My previous job, I put in my 2 weeks notice and got a contract to do contract work for them, and it's a great stability piece there that gives you the ability to ramp up and do more things, and yeah, same thing with myself. It's when I first started the business, I almost would take on any project that someone came to me with.
Anything, yeah.
It's just like, okay, I will help you with that, and I will help you with this as well, even though it's not really what I want to be focusing on. But then, you have to build reputation and a book of business to be able to showcase your work, and then you feel more comfortable being selective.
Right.
I still struggle with it though, because I want to help everybody. But you do have to kind of narrow down what your focus is and what you find joy in. And I think that it sounds like you're doing it, which is awesome.
That's how it works. I think you said to me earlier, hire people who are smarter than you, right? That's key. And even though I don't have employees, if I work with contractors of any kind, especially in video production, I hire the guys I work with that are much better at that than I could ever be.
Yeah.
And it makes my life in post-production that much easier. And so you start to learn, I think, and just acknowledge with your own self, okay, I can do this well, but this maybe isn't my strength.
Yeah, and actually it's something where if you don't recognize that, I think you just get in your own way. It's like I do have a great staff with unique talents, things that I'm not even good at that other people are good at. Yeah. And if I just thought that I could do it all on my own, I would still be we'd still be a much smaller company, not doing these big projects that we get to do. So it's weird, but you have to be humble in order to grow.
Exactly.
And so that's great.
Yeah.
What do you see down the line for you? Like, is there are you in the spot that you kind of want to be for long term, or do you have other aspirations? Yeah,
that's a good question too. It's difficult to forecast. I think sometimes in the past I would spend so much time thinking about what am I going to do in the future, what's going to be next, and that became so exhausting. I think I live a little more day to day than I used to. That doesn't mean we don't have vision for the future and that sort of thing, but I try not to hyper focus on where we're going to be 5 years from now.
Yeah.
But saying all that, I will say we do have, my wife and I have some visions of possibly relocating back to Kentucky eventually, which is where we first met. Sure. There's some connections I have there with friends that work in post-production as well, and we've had talks about working together,
Yeah.
even as contractors,
Yeah.
in the post world. So there's possibilities there.
Sure.
And if we do, we'll definitely be calling you.
Yeah.
Because
That'd be
I think
awesome.
starting from scratch, again, is a bit of a scary idea when you've done it once. It's like,
Sure.
oh man, I don't have the energy to do that again.
Yeah.
But you also learn things, and I want to be able to take from the hard lessons and apply them to what we do next.
Yeah.
If we do it. So,
Yeah, and that's what we do for every project. It's like anyone who hires us today is benefiting from the last 14 years
Absolutely.
of things that we've learned and mistakes and victories. Like it all comes together, and I'm sure your next space will be even cooler than this one, which is a challenge, but it's
a challenge. But yeah,
that's awesome. So I'm thinking with like your own personal music. We talked about this off camera a little bit, because I play music as well. Do you find it hard to make time for that part of your life versus what you do for work plus family and everything else?
It's true. I think. Well, I will say we have one son who's 17 now, and he's growing up too fast, and so life is a little bit simpler in a ways because he can drive himself places, and that frees up my time.
Yeah.
So I've been able to get back into music as a hobby, music as therapy, like we talked about.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge part of the past year for me, is to be able to take a break from work sometimes, take a break from the things that are consuming, and just work on music because it's fun.
Yeah.
And because I love it. And I'm not trying to make anything of it myself. I know my limitations. And so it gives me the freedom to just make music because it's something that I love to do.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm trying to get back into that.
Yeah.
I think I'm in a stage where, your son's 17, my kids are 8 and 4, so I'm still in the thick of things right now. But it is something that when I make the time for it, it helps me realize why I'm even doing what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Like why I got into this industry at all was because I love music, and so it's I need to carve out that time, because every time I'm driving to a rehearsal or something like that, I'm always thinking of all the other things I should be doing and all the stress and things like that. But then once you're doing it, like you're sitting down to write a song or record something, you're just like, okay, like this is what gives me life, and so it's something I'm going to try to do more of, and it's nice to hear that you're finding that time.
Well, I think too, the cool thing with music, especially in sound, and even with what you do with acoustical work and such, it's all connected.
Yeah.
I think with sound design, especially for film, you're creating this kind of oral experience, with sound, which it's almost like music in a way. It's kind of a dance between dialogue and ambience and sound effects and the music that's been scored for the film even. Yeah. But there's times when that music is not there, that the sound itself becomes the music, if you will, at least for me. And so I think it all connects. Yeah. Even if it's not my career path.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Well, thanks so much for sitting down with us and being on the podcast. It's always every time I come here, it's nice to reconnect with you, because I feel like we have a lot of similarities, and it's just neat to see your business, which has always been successful. It's just morphed into different ways.
Always changing. Yeah.
And so so thanks again for having us here, and
thank you, Gab.
And looking forward to the next 5-10 years, and then maybe we catch up again.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for watching this episode and being a part of the S.O.U.N.D project. If you have any ideas for future episodes, feel free to email info@haversickdesigns.com, and we'll see you next week.